Hey guys, welcome to the topic, which is your automating the software company's development environment, that is the dev environment. Well, I want to thank you for deciding to take this course, and I welcome you guys in the exciting journey of this case study. Well, before starting, let's have a brief introduction about DevOps, because this project is on DevOps and we are using some tools of DevOps, which we have mentioned here, like we are using Git, Jenkins and Ansible. Although it has a variety of tools, and actually DevOps is not a tools, it's not about tools and all, it's a methodology. And inside DevOps methodology, we have a lot of tools inside it. So among all those tools, we are using few tools here. Let's have a brief introduction about DevOps. So how do you define DevOps? Well, you can define DevOps is it's a set of practices that combines software development and its operations. Well, it aims to shorten the system development life cycle and provide continuous delivery with high software quality. In other ways, if you want to define, you can say DevOps is a combination of cultural philosophies, practices, and tools that increases an organization's ability to deliver applications, services at a very high speed or velocity you maintain. Okay, and well, the evolving and improving products at a faster pace that organization usually follows. If an organization is following traditional software development, then through DevOps it can evolve and improve the products at a very faster pace. You can say it's a very popular methodology and it has very different flavors. It can be either used as your configuration management tool, and in this case study we are using one of that is you are using Git. It's a configuration management tool, and depending on your needs, it can be as your project automation purposes. We have Jenkins and Ansible, and through this, and there are a lot of other varieties. I'm not talking about those, I'm just talking about the tools what I'm using in this project. So it can be used as your project automation purposes or project orchestration or deployment purposes. Although we are using Jenkins and Ansible, so Jenkins also it's a build tool and it can deploy also, but in this case study we are specifically mentioning Jenkins as a build tool, and we are taking Ansible as your deployment tool. But Ansible can be used as your configuration management tool as well. So it has many different forms, it has many different flavors. Don't worry about that, we'll be taking care of all these softwares and tools in the later videos. The goal of this course is to give you the confidence to introduce DevOps methodology in your infrastructure. Suppose if you're working for any MNC, or you're working and you're just having a startup. So the goal is to provide you the infrastructure and the confidence so that you can use this DevOps as an infrastructure as a code. Well, talking about the next slide, what we have is a difficulty level. So the difficulty level what I have set is the intermediate. It's a tough one, we can mention as a difficult level, but I will be dividing the harder terms and other things in a very softer manner, and will present you in such a way that it will be very easy for you to grasp. But let's take a moment to discuss the background of this course and what you should be familiar before you jump in. Well, a big part of learning DevOps is being able to describe infrastructure as a code. Not only code, we are just creating all the infrastructure, may it be code or as a platform, everything. So part of which will be using a Linux style command line tool. So before you jump into the course, make sure you are familiar with navigating or changing directories inside the Linux box, listing contents of the directory, and viewing the editing text file. Although you will be able to use text editors of your choice, the majority of this course you may find files needing to edit files directly on your machine. Therefore, if you never use a text editor like Vim, VI, Nano, Emacs, you might look into that before you attempt to jump in. We will be doing a lot of case study which will be based on your Linux style command line tool, the environment variables, all those things, environment home path, these things will be discussed. You should also be aware that you are going to see a lot of code in this course. Not only code, we will be having some pseudo codes and different type of codes, may it be Java code or JSON file, other things we'll be saying. So let me be very clear, you don't need to be a developer to get started learning this DevOps methodology. But because of your DevOps reliance on your Java language and in this course study we'll be using HTML. You'll be having some high level understanding of variables, how you gonna pass variables into functions or arguments, which we can skip also, but we'll try to mix up all those things so that whenever we have to present our DevOps project, you make a formation of all those things and combine this together and present it. Other things what you need to know is like knowledge of your version control, CI/CD pipeline, and knowledge of your Ansible architecture. Talking about the course objective, participants will be able to, these are things we have to able to, you have to implement Git as your version control and code repository. The second thing is like what we have discussed is like implement CI/CD pipeline through Jenkins, use Jenkins as deployment tool, establish password or keyless infrastructure. So the first tool what we are gonna use is we'll be using Git. So Git is a version control system. Traditionally we used to have SVN and other centralized version control, but Git is not centralized version control. It's a distributed distributed version control. So the differences will be knowing when we install Git. So you just need to know one thing, like Git is one of the DevOps tool. Simultaneously you can work on a lot of code, and it creates a local repository on your developer machine, so that if many developers are working together, they can commit the code together without impacting your source directory. Then comes your CI/CD pipeline. So CI/CD means continuous integration and continuous delivery through Jenkins. So in this course study we'll be installing Jenkins, and we'll make sure the CI/CD pipeline is there in Jenkins. Although Jenkins is used for build and deployment purposes, in this case study we'll make Jenkins to look only to the building, and I will be using Ansible as your deployment tool. So you should be aware of the Ansible architecture. Ansible is a push mesh mechanism, so it's very easy to set up, but the only thing you need to know is what is actually the architecture of Ansible, and what some commands what we use there, what are playbooks and all. So these are the basic terms which you should be knowing before jumping in. And the last thing is like establishing password or keyless infrastructure. So what will happen once your developer commits the code to Git will push the code to your Jenkins. Jenkins will create an artifact. So basically when developer commits a Java code, it goes into your Jenkins. Through Jenkins repository it will build that Java code, and it will give the artifact to your Ansible. Now what Ansible will do, Ansible will connect to the Apache server. Now this is not the same Apache, this is not the proxy Apache server. We are installing Apache Tomcat here. I will be describing you the differences between what is the Apache Tomcat and what is normal Apache, what is proxy server and what is your application server, that is what is web server and your application server. We'll be discussing this in later videos. So what we'll do, we'll make a passwordless or keyless infrastructure between your Ansible and your Apache Tomcat server, so that because your Ansible depends on your SSH methodology, if you connect your Apache server to Ansible through SSH, then only you will be able to deploy those things on the environment. Well, moving to the next slide, what you will learn in this project. So of course you will be learning how to configure and set up Git as your version control system. So we'll learn step by step how to get your Git configured as your version control, how you are editing code in your Git and committing it, and how you are making all those necessary changes in your Git repository. The other things is your Jenkins installation, and we'll be installing Jenkins, we'll be configuring and we'll be adding nodes, we'll be creating jobs or pipelines. It depends on the requirements, what requirements we have actually for the job, for the case study. Based on that we'll be doing it, but primarily we'll be just installing Jenkins. Apart from installing Jenkins, we have to configure Java, we have to configure Maven, because in this case study we are using Maven as our build tool. We'll be creating jobs, of course, because without creating jobs, Jenkins is there is no purpose of Jenkins only. After that, the last thing is securing shell through different nodes or machine. Well, going to the next slide, we have and one more thing is pending, deploying projects on web server through Ansible. So web server is nothing but your Apache Tomcat server, which is actually an application server, but that's okay. Your Apache Tomcat server acts like web server also and application server also. In this case study, we'll be deploying mostly the web projects, that is HTML contents. So it may be in any format, that doesn't depend, but it actually your Apache Tomcat is based both your application server and your web server. So once we build the code, we'll deploy to our Tomcat server through Ansible. Going to the next slide. Are there any project requirements or prerequisites?